The thing you're chasing isn't wrong, but your need for it, that's the trap. Carl Jung believed that obsession blinds clarity. And the second you stop trying to get it, you start becoming the version of you that already has it. This isn't another detach and manifest cliché. This is a psychological transformation. And if you stay until the end of this video, not just part 1, but all 3 parts, you'll walk away with a truth that most people spend their entire lives chasing, but never realize. That the moment you stop needing something to fill the void, you realize the void was never empty. And once you see it, you'll never chase the same way again. So let's begin. Why do you want it so badly? This is where most people stop. They assume it's obvious. I want love because I'm tired of being alone. I want success so I can take care of my family. I want peace because I'm always anxious. But Jung would ask you to go deeper, because the conscious mind will always answer with logic. But the unconscious tells the real truth, in symbols, in repetition, in pain. You don't want love. You want to feel safe in connection. You don't want success. You want to silence the voice that said you were never good enough. You don't want peace. You want freedom from the war inside your own mind. And here's the thing. The more unaware you are of these deeper drivers, the more intensely you chase surface solutions. But they don't stick. You find someone, but still feel lonely. You hit a goal and feel even more lost. You try to rest, and your thoughts get louder. Because the wanting wasn't about the thing. It was about identity. The unconscious belief that if you finally get it, then you'll be worthy. But here's the trap. That mindset turns your desire into a survival mechanism. And survival doesn't attract. It repels. It keeps you locked in a loop. You want it. You chase it. You don't get it. So you try harder. You grip tighter. And the harder you try, the more it slips through your fingers. You might tell yourself you're manifesting, but deep down, you're panicking. Every step forward feels like a step away, because your subconscious isn't creating from peace. It's reacting from fear. And fear doesn't manifest. It multiplies itself. You might start to believe you're cursed. You'll start blaming yourself, or others, or timing. You'll bounce from one strategy to the next. But the feeling remains. Why can't I just get there? Because the truth is, you're not chasing a result. You're chasing a relief from your own thoughts. And that's why it hurts so much. The failure isn't just external. It feels like a personal confirmation of the inner belief that something is wrong with you. This is why people break down after success, why loneliness can strike even inside a relationship, why peace feels boring after years of chaos, because you've mistaken urgency for meaning. How do you stop the chase? You don't kill desire. That's not the goal. Desire is part of being human. But you do learn how to listen to it without obeying it blindly. You make space between your need and your action. You ask, what part of me thinks I'm not whole without this? Whose voice is whispering that I have to be more? Where did I learn that struggle equals value? You become curious about your desperation. You start seeing your patterns, not as flaws, but as echoes of younger versions of you still asking to be seen. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Most people never pause long enough to question their fate. They live in reaction, in noise, in the fear that if they stop running, they'll collapse. But stopping is the beginning. When you no longer act from scarcity, you start creating from sovereignty. You walk into rooms without explaining yourself. You pursue your goals with detachment. You love without collapsing. You wait without panicking. You let go, and things begin to arrive. Not because the universe suddenly rewards you, but because you're finally aligned with what you were chasing all along. A version of you that no longer doubts their own worth. Revealing first truth. You stop wanting it from a place of need, and it stops controlling you. You realize the timeline wasn't your enemy. It was your teacher. It taught you that obsession isn't clarity, that pressure isn't power, that craving isn't love. And now, because you've seen it, you are no longer possessed by it. That's what Jung meant when he said, "Freedom is not found in the denial of desire, but in understanding its root." Most people never get there. They spend their lives reacting to their wounds, repeating patterns with new faces, calling it growth, when it's just exhaustion in disguise. But not you. Not anymore. Because you saw the cycle, you traced it back. And instead of begging life to give you what you thought you needed, you turned inward and became someone who didn't need it to feel whole. Now you're dangerous, not in aggression, but in certainty. You walk softer, but your presence is louder. You speak less, but your energy says everything. And that's when it all begins to shift. The opportunities arrive. The clarity comes. The right people enter. The timing aligns. Because you no longer chase, you attract, not by manipulation, but by embodiment. You've stopped being a seeker and started being a signal. You still want it. That's okay. But now you know the truth. You don't want the thing. You want the version of you who no longer needs it to feel at peace. And that version is already inside you. The chase is over. The return has begun. You've stopped running. But now what? Most people think that once they stop chasing, everything will finally fall into place. That letting go is some magical doorway where the universe suddenly cooperates. That clarity, love, purpose, or peace just arrives. But Jung would argue, that's not how transformation works. Letting go doesn't end the discomfort. It changes it. Because now that the noise has quieted, you can finally hear something else, something older, something more honest. And sometimes that voice says, I don't know who I am without the chase. This is the second trap. The mind attaches not just to outcomes, but to the identity that forms in pursuit of those outcomes. You weren't just striving for the goal. You were becoming someone inside that striving. You learned how to be valuable in the tension. You learned how to be seen by performing, by suffering, by achieving. So when the chase stops, you grieve. Not because you lost the thing, but because you lost the version of you who depended on it. Let that sink in. You are grieving the death of an inner identity, the one who believed that being enough was something to earn. Jung called this ego death. And unlike what most people think, it doesn't feel like a victory parade. It feels like confusion, emptiness, silence. You've peeled off a layer of yourself, and underneath isn't enlightenment. It's exposure. So, why do we feel worse after letting go of the thing we were so obsessed with? Because even though the pressure hurt, it was familiar. It gave you a reason to keep moving. It gave your life structure, even if that structure was built on pain. You knew how to function as someone with a goal, someone on the brink, someone almost there. It kept you occupied. It made you feel useful. And when that noise disappears, you meet the silence. And silence is terrifying. You realize the chasing was a distraction, a loud, desperate distraction from the ache beneath. The ache that says, I don't know how to be still. I don't know how to just be. I don't know who I am without striving. And here's the twist. That ache isn't new. It's ancient. It's the child inside you who equated effort with love, who was told, directly or indirectly, that peace must be earned, that worth comes after the struggle, that love must be proven. So you never learned how to exist without effort. And when you finally stop running, it all comes rushing in. The stillness, the self-doubt, the questions, and it feels wrong. But Jung would tell you, that's not wrong. That's withdrawal. You are detoxing from a psychological addiction to needing to be on the way to something. And the void you feel? That's not emptiness. That's room. Room to rebuild your sense of self, not as someone chasing the dream, but as someone living from it. What happens when you stay inside this in-between? You begin to hear your true voice again. At first, it's faint, because your mind will try to pull you back. It will whisper, shouldn't you be doing more? Maybe you're falling behind. You'll lose momentum if you relax. But eventually, that voice weakens, and something softer rises. It doesn't speak in urgency. It speaks in clarity. It doesn't bark orders. It asks simple questions. What feels real right now? What are you pretending to want? What if it's already enough? And in those questions, your nervous system begins to heal. You stop planning your entire life in fear. You stop negotiating with imaginary threats. You stop needing others to validate your direction. You start creating from peace, not pressure. You begin choosing from groundedness, not guilt. You realize you don't have to earn rest. You don't have to explain your boundaries. You don't have to make yourself smaller to be safe. And that is the real beginning of alignment. The version of you that comes out of this pause is no longer reactive. They're rooted. They don't panic when things don't go their way. They don't spiral when people misunderstand them. They don't self-abandon at the first sign of tension. Why? Because their value is no longer up for negotiation. They've reclaimed their center, not by achieving more, but by releasing the belief that they ever needed to be more than who they already are. It starts quietly. You wake up, and you no longer reach for your phone like it's oxygen. You walk into a room, and you don't scan for approval. You have a conversation, and you're not rehearsing your worth while you speak. You move slower, but you feel stronger. You don't chase. You choose. You don't impress. You express. You don't react. You respond. And your energy begins to change, not in some spiritual fantasy way, but in real, grounded, observable patterns. People feel safer around you. because you're no longer leaking urgency. Opportunities begin to find you, because you're not suffocating them with need. You walk into spaces and take up exactly the space you were meant to. Not more, not less. You become someone who doesn't need permission to exist. And this, Jung would say, is the return of the self. Not the false self, the persona who lives for the performance, but the real self, the one beneath all of that, the one who remembers, the one who never needed fixing. Revealing second truth. When you no longer identify with the one who is always chasing, you begin to embody the one who has already arrived. You stop asking life to give you signs. You realize you are the sign. You stop trying to prove your worth. You realize your being is the proof. You stop waiting to be chosen. You realize you are the chooser. And this changes everything. It changes how you love, no longer with attachment, but with freedom. It changes how you work, no longer for approval, but for expression. It changes how you rest, no longer as recovery, but as rhythm. You become whole, not because the world gave you what you wanted, but because you saw that the wanting was never the problem. The grip was. And now that your hands are open, you can finally receive. Not just the things, but the truth, that nothing was ever missing. You were never too late. You were never behind. You were never broken. You were just taught to believe that peace comes later. And now you know it comes first. And from that peace, everything else aligns. You've released the grip. You've made peace with the silence. And now, you're standing at the edge of something unfamiliar. Not another goal, not another craving, but a new way of being. This is the third transformation. Not the letting go, not the integration, but the quiet power that begins to build when you no longer need power at all. It doesn't shout. It doesn't prove. It simply is. This is the self, fully remembered. Carl Jung didn't just theorize about the unconscious. He believed the path of every person was to confront the shadow, to dissolve the mask, and to return home, not to who they should be, but who they already were before the world told them to become something else. And this is that return. Because the world rewards striving. It applauds the seeker, the hustler, the one who's always working on something. To stop chasing feels lazy, feels dangerous, feels like betrayal to the identity you spent years constructing. But what if all that construction, all that fixing, optimizing, upgrading, was actually a cage? A beautiful one, a socially accepted one, but a cage nonetheless. One that told you that stillness is failure. One that convinced you that if you're not struggling, you're not growing. Jung warned about this trap, the inflation of the persona. When we start believing the mask is who we are, when we build a version of ourselves based on admiration, not authenticity. It's easy to chase goals when your worth depends on reaching them. It's easy to overwork when your safety depends on performance. It's easy to people-please when your identity depends on being needed. But all of it exhausts you, because deep down, none of it was ever really you. What happens when you finally stop pretending? At first, It's disorienting. You pause and realize how much of your life has been lived on autopilot. You say no and feel guilty for hours. You rest and wait for punishment. You tell the truth and brace for abandonment. Because the real you hasn't been in the driver's seat for a very long time. And now that you're letting them speak, your nervous system doesn't trust it yet. You're rebuilding an internal foundation that isn't built on fear. You're teaching your body that calm is safe. You're teaching your heart that love doesn't require sacrifice. You're teaching your mind that success doesn't require self-betrayal. And it's in that space, not the rush, not the hype, that you finally begin to feel alive again. Not productive, not impressive, but present. You realize that happiness doesn't scream. It hums. It sits with you in silence. It shows up in the tiniest ways. The way your shoulders drop. The way you breathe deeper without noticing. The way time stops feeling like an enemy. You remember what it's like to exist without editing yourself. And that is priceless. How do you live from this place? Not just visit it. Live in it. Build your decisions around it. Shape your life through it. You start by choosing presence over performance. Again and again. You stop saying yes when you mean no. You stop proving things to people who have already made up their minds. You stop abandoning your needs just to be liked. You stop shrinking to fit into places you've outgrown. And slowly, your outer life begins to match your inner one. You begin setting boundaries without apology. You begin choosing relationships that feel like peace, not tension. You begin working from inspiration, not fear. You begin resting without guilt. You start letting your no be as holy as your yes. This is integration. This is embodiment. This is when spirituality stops being a concept and starts becoming your nervous system. You no longer ask, "What do they want from me?" You ask, "What honors the truth of who I am now?" You no longer chase alignment. You are alignment. And when you slip because you will, you don't spiral. You notice. You pause. You recalibrate. Not because you're failing, but because you're human. And every time you return to yourself, the returning gets easier. When you stop needing life to prove your worth, you begin living in a way that automatically proves it. People start reacting to your energy differently. Not because you're louder, but because you're real. You become a mirror, not of their expectations, but of their own forgotten truth. And it stirs something in them. They sense the depth, the peace, the boundary, the fire, not flaring out of control, but contained, refined, warm. You've gone from needing power to embodying it, from seeking permission to granting it, from chasing love to radiating it, revealing final Jungian truth. When you stop trying to become, you begin to remember. And the person you remember, the one underneath the roles, the masks, the trauma, was never lacking. They were simply waiting, watching, hoping you'd slow down long enough to feel them again. And now, you have. So what comes next? That's up to you. Because now, you're not reacting to life. You're meeting it. You're not begging the world to show up for you. You're showing up for yourself. The wanting hasn't vanished, but it's softened. It no longer screams. It whispers. And you listen, but you don't obey blindly. You trust yourself now. You trust the pauses. You trust the no's. You trust the timing. You trust your enoughness. And in that trust, everything begins to align. Not because you forced it, not because you earned it, but because you remembered that peace doesn't arrive when the world bends to your will. Peace arrives the moment you no longer need it to. So here's the final message. You'll get it the moment you stop needing it. You'll see it the moment you stop searching. You'll hold it the moment you stop gripping. Because that thing you've been wanting, it was never outside you. It was always this, a version of you that already has it, already lives it, already breathes in a way that says, I'm not chasing peace anymore. I am peace. And now that you've remembered, you're free.